Welcome to this lesson. Amazon CloudWatch is principally a performance monitoring tool. It also has several other functions, and what I want to do in this lesson is introduce you to the various functions of CloudWatch, give you a bit of a background on what it does, and then we're just going to go into the console and have a look at some of the performance metrics that get generated by CloudWatch. This is really about just giving you a quick orientation of CloudWatch so you know where to go to look for this kind of information. So we've got Amazon CloudWatch, and it can collect various pieces of information. For example, it can collect logs from Amazon EC2 instances as well as on-premise instances. They can be application logs and system logs. It can collect metrics about lots of different AWS resources, pretty much all AWS resources. For example, here we've got a VPC that might have a VPN connection, so it's generating metrics for the state of the VPN tunnel and the amount of data that's going in and out of that tunnel. Then we have an application load balancer. In this case, it's reporting a metric that shows the number of unhealthy hosts that are behind the application load balancer's target groups. We can then have alarms triggered. So for example, the ALB might be generating an alarm, and that alarm is then going to trigger an action. If we had a network load balancer, again, we can trigger more metrics about the healthy host count and quite a bit of detailed information about the metrics associated with the performance of the network load balancer. And lastly, there's a dashboard. So all of this information gets gathered, and then you can report on it and you can view the data in various forms in the dashboard itself. Now note that the arrows are all pointing into CloudWatch. CloudWatch is a service which collects metrics, but the metrics are sent from the actual AWS service. Now, most AWS services will send some kind of metrics to CloudWatch by default, but then you can also define your own custom metrics that you want to collect. So there's just a little bit of theory. Let's head over to AWS and have a look at the CloudWatch console. So here I am in the CloudWatch console, and you'll see there's lots of stuff on the left-hand side here. So let's go through this a little bit. Firstly, there's dashboards. Now, these are personalized dashboards that you can create. So you create a dashboard, you give it a name, and then you add various metrics and widgets to the dashboard. Next up, we have alarms. We only have one configured, and it's in an OK state. And that is the billing alarm that we put together at the beginning of the course. So we haven't reached our threshold, so that's great. We then have logs. Within logs, you have log groups, and we haven't used any in this course, but quite a few services can send log information to CloudWatch logs. Then we have metrics. We'll come back to that in a moment. That's mainly what I want to show you. Then you have events. With CloudWatch events, you can create rules that track the state of your resources. So for instance, you can create a rule, and let's choose a service like EC2, and then the event type might be instant state change. And then we could choose a specific state like terminated. So now what we can do is we can track the EC2 instance, and when they change state to terminated, we can do something. For instance, we can send some information to a Lambda function, or we can trigger an SNS topic to notify us. So that's CloudWatch events. Then we have a few newer features for tracking microservices, applications, containers, and Lambda. Now what I mainly want to show you is metrics. These are the metrics that have been sent to CloudWatch from the services that we've been running so far in the hands-on lessons in this course. So not everything's here, just the stuff we've been using within this specific region. So when we launch a service, it's going to send metrics to CloudWatch, and most services will have some standard metrics that they send to CloudWatch, and then you can configure custom metrics as well in some cases. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. We've got EC2 here. If we go into EC2, we can go to per instance metrics. Now I actually have a running instance. So what I want to do is filter by the instance ID so I just see the metrics associated with that instance. So in EC2, what I'm going to do is just take the instance ID of this instance, put this into the search box here and filter. So now I just have the metrics associated with that one instance. And if I select all of these, you can see I get a bit of information up here. Not a huge amount because it's not really doing much, but you can see a bit of information here for the network in, the network out, the packets in, the packets out. We've got some CPU information here and some status check information as well. So let's just deselect these metrics, remove our filter, and then let's go back up to all. So you'll see there's other services, like we have the network ELB here. So let's go to the per load balancer metrics. Now, by the way, these are called dimensions, so it's different ways of presenting the metrics that have been gathered by CloudWatch. So in this case, we're looking at the per load balancer metrics. And if I just select these, we'll see we've got a bit of information graphed here for a network load balancer that I currently have running. So we can see the process bytes, TCP, active flow counts, and various other TCP and connection level pieces of information. Now let's contrast that with going back up a level, go to the application ELB, per app ELB metrics, and then let's graph these up, and I do have a load balancer running. So you can see we've got some more application level metrics here, like the HTTP codes, the 2XX, the 3XX, and the 4XX. You can also see things like the request count here. So let's cancel out of those or deselect those, come back up a level, and you can see we've got a NAT gateway here, and you'll see some metrics for the NAT gateway. We don't have any data recorded because we don't have a NAT gateway running at the moment. And then I've also got VPN. So you can see we've got things like the tunnel metrics here, where for each of the tunnels, you'll get the tunnel state and then the data in and the data out. The metric data is actually retained in CloudWatch for up to 15 months, depending on the resolution. So if you're collecting data every 60 minutes for a specific metric, it will remain for 15 months. And if you go all the way down to 60 seconds, then it's only 3 hours. So it does depend on the resolution of your metrics. Now, if we go back up to dashboards, in here we can create a dashboard. So let's just call this My Dash and create the dashboard. And now we get the options here for the type of widget that we want to use. So for instance, we can have the line here, we can have a pie chart, we can have a logs table, lots of different options. So for example, let's choose a line, click on next. From which data source would you like to create the widget? Let's choose metrics rather than logs, and then configure. So now you get the option to find the metrics that you're interested in. So perhaps I'm just interested in tracking this particular EC2 instance. So now I can add all of these to my widget. And if I wanted to, I could change this to my server. So now I have my own little dashboard here with one widget in it so far that has a server that's being tracked, so a particular EC2 instance. So I'm just tracking the metrics for this particular instance, but you can have a widget which has metrics from various different services as well. So that's CloudWatch. That's all I wanted to show you. I hope that's useful to you, and I'll see you in the next lesson.